Welcome to the PAS Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Girodano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the PAS Report podcast. Here's your host, Nick Girodano. I want to thank you for joining me today. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Also, visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends, because I got an important guest with an important message, someone who understands what the fight is about. And a few weeks ago, I did an episode on the Southern Poverty Law Center. What a corrupt organization it is. It's an ideological organization. It's part of the machine. Our government, our own government, outsourced intelligence to this agency, which isn't elected by anyone. They're operating as a shadow intelligence agency. So I want to welcome to the program Terry Newsome, a father of twins from Darien, Illinois, two-time elected Republican precinct committee person, Illinois chapter president of Parents Involved in Education, and host of the Behind Enemy Lines podcast. Terry, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate getting this story out there.
Well, it's an important story because I want the audience to understand this right from the beginning. Before the headlines, before the Southern Poverty Law Center, before the labels, you were a father. You had twins in the school system. You woke up every morning, got the kids ready for school. You went to work, but you started to pay attention to what was being taught in the classroom, what was being taught in the schools, what was being made available to the students. So walk us through the moment where you went from an ordinary dad to someone who said, I have to get involved.
Yeah, so I was raised southwest side of Chicago. Obviously, I'm half Italian by the last name. I don't have the last Italian name. My grandparents came from Italy, and that we lived with, raised in the southwest side, blue Democratic part of Chicago. My dad worked for the city of Chicago. My aunts and uncles and Italian, all, union workers. I didn't know anything about being a Democrat. That's what I was raised, but I was never involved in politics. Ever involved in politics. I gradually started transitioning to the right as I got older and smarter. And so when my kids were in school, I started paying a little bit of more attention. I got remarried. I got younger twins that are now in college, but this is right before they went into high school in the western suburbs, fully woke, turned blue. As my son graduated from 8th grade, the 2 weeks before he graduated, he came home. It's my first exposure to this crazy indoctrination. And he knows a little bit of my politics, even though I wasn't involved. He's like, Dad, you're not going to believe what my teacher told me. She said, there's no such thing as the American dream. I said, what? I go, sit down. I was doing my computer. I go, what do you mean that? She goes, well, she said that it's not achievable for everybody. It's not attainable. They can't get it. It's, certain people don't have access to it. I said, what? I go, are you sure about that? He goes, yeah, I'm positive, Dad. So I called the principal and I restated that. And I said, so-and-so teacher said this. I hope my son's wrong. I hope he misunderstood. And the principal calls me back and says, oh, no, Anthony was correct, but it wasn't teaching. It was just conversational. I said,
what does that even mean?
Yeah, I said, that shouldn't take place with these children in 8th grade. They should think they could go to Mars. They should think anything to start, so that I told them, I said, you know what, I'm pissed. I go, the kids are going into high school. Little did I know it was going to get worse, And so I said, I'm just going to forget about it. They're graduating. And so here comes high school, and it was the COVID masking. They were starting when they had to wear masks. I was kind of upset about that in Pritzker, Illinois.
That was criminal, in my opinion.
Oh, that was awful. So I go to my first school board meeting. I met moms via email and stuff, never met them in person. I actually went right before the kids started school so we could protest the masks. I show up to the first board meeting. All of them were kicked out. There's only one dad. The dads aren't helping the mothers, by the way, especially then. And I said, what happened? I heard about this board, the radical Marxists. And one woman goes, well, I went over my 3 minutes, so they kicked us out and called a closed-door meeting because they don't want to hear it. And I go, screw that. I go, I'm going to teach you how to fight like an ex-Southwest Side Democrat, Italian union member. And I'm going to give them the same lack of respect they give you. And, here I am. It was a long story. So I started going to the meetings and calling them out and stuff, big time.
Now, when you first raised concerns, did you think you were entering a political war, or did you think you were doing what any normal parent should be doing?
First, I thought it was a normal thing that a parent should do. Yes, I knew about the political war, but I didn't know really why these people were scared to speak up. I'm like, I said, I'm not worried about these guys. I said, after what I changed my life from 35 years ago. I was involved in the Southwest Side Italian guys. So I think that's part of why I'm a little different. I totally changed my life 35 years ago. So I think that's why I'm a little different than most fathers in confronting that stuff compared to what I did my first phase of my life. And so I started going to school board meeting. I should have had the posters here I blew up the posters from Genderqueer. That's what launched me. I had the nasty oral sex images from the book Genderqueer. When a mother first showed me that book, and I was like, that's not my kid's school. The same reaction, even to this day, I show people that are, it's about a girl, there's a girl and a boy wanting to be a girl on his knees performing oral sex. And I go, that is not in the kid's school. So I had my son, Anthony, take a picture and I'm like, oh my God, it is. And it was worse. So I blew up those posters. I went to the school board meeting. I could not find a single father to help me, Nick, not one.
So pathetic.
So I had Proud Boys, local Proud Boys friends of mine, come and and that's how this connection blew up. Proud Boy, right? So I had them. I said, guys, come as fathers. Don't come in your dress. I don't want to take away from my message about the porn and the indoctrination. So do that. Don't flash your signs, all that crazy stuff. And they said yes. Unknown to me at that time, one of the moms on the left was associated with Antifa. And this later came out. She was actually national news. If you remember the Waukesha parade massacre with Leon,
I do.
She put something out about it, praising them and saying they got what they deserved because of Kyle Rittenhouse. Went national, Fox News, and then the Democratic Party shunned her because they had to politically, and then she changed her X page saying, "I am anti-fascist, BLM." And so that goes back to when I'm speaking up at the board meeting, and I start seeing my pictures on Antifa websites. Or, on their X accounts at the time.
Is that the moment that you noticed that this wasn't just a simple disagreement with school policy, that there's people actively trying to destroy your reputation?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, and so then I saw that Twitter post. I saw where that woman sat. I saw the angles of the pictures that were going up with me and other fathers, that were going up on the Antifa sites, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my God, that's her, And so that's how we got that connection. And they had the Chicago Sun-Times show up to one of my board meetings, and the one with the Proud Boys that showed up. And I'm telling you, they did nothing. They did nothing wrong. They honored my request, right? They held the signs. It's in the front page. I should have, front page of the Sun. 3 full pages, Nick. Proud Boys take over school board meeting. I mean, talk about media bullshit. I mean, it's a Proud Boy. That was the heading in the Chicago Sun-Times. And those guys were there. They hold my posters. They didn't say anything. But that woman and the left is tied in, as integrated into the media, right? They changed the narrative from porn indoctrinating our kids to Proud Boys take over the school board meeting.
Well, that's what it is. They constantly use labels, and they use these labels to denigrate and dehumanize their political opponents, to try and marginalize them, silence them, portray them as extremists. And that's something that's been going on for quite some time. Now, this is at the height. You had the George Floyd riots take place. You have COVID and lockdowns. So did anyone from the school ever reach out to you and say, hey, I understand your concerns, and I agree with you, but I can't really speak out because it's my job or whatever like that?
They're all radical leftists with the exception of a coach who's now retired. My son played football and wrestling. And he loved my son. My son honors, and my twins were really, really smart. They take after their mother, not me. And coach loved him. He was in wrestling and football, and he was his science teacher. And I said something to him, and he probably was like, "Oh my God," he didn't even know. I'm like, he's like a guy, he's like, "Holy shit," but he didn't say anything. But the rest of them were Marxist leftists. At that school board meeting, the superintendent, Hank Thiele, Marxist, pushes all this stuff. He invited the Downers Grove Police Department, the DuPage County Sheriffs, and they had riot gear there. There.
That's so ridiculous.
The TPUSA did a story on it, and they got the pictures of the riot gear. The NAACP chapter showed up. The Illinois state legislation, LGBTQ, they all spoke out, and it kind of launched me into starting to, the visibility I got specifically and only and exclusively first fighting for our kids. And about a year later, It was November of 2022. One of the moms called me because I would send emails and stuff to the, kind of like insulting them for what they're doing. I tried to start a TPUSA. They wouldn't let me because Charlie Kirk was violent for my kids. I tried to help support them. They wouldn't let them. And then one of the moms said, yeah, there's a guy, Jeff Tischhauser from the SPLC, because you could FOIAs.
So when did you first find out that the Southern Poverty Law Center was investigating you and actually wrote about you?
Yeah, it was in early November of 2022 when a mother called me, told me that this guy, Jeff Tischhauser, Chicago Antifa associate, I think I showed you some of the evidence, right? Showing, and then Southern Center for Self-Governance has all this information. So absolutely 100%. Radical leftist PhD from University of Wisconsin. Father was arrested. He's on his Blue Sky site. His dad was a radical getting arrested in the 70s. He's all proud, right? And so he started asking emails and stuff about me to the superintendent and stuff and sharing them. And then the first story they published on me came out on November 31st of 2022, like 24, 48 hours before that. He sent me some email questions. Again, I didn't know who the SPLC was at that time, right? And I was going to respond. Don't respond, And then so I didn't respond. And the story came out. I was devastated, right? They acted like I was a racist, white supremacist, ties to the Proud Boys, all this, I flashed the white supremacy sign that was on the first story they wrote. And that sign was in Mount Prospect Police, where that came from. My friend was a Chicago police officer, just retired. We went up there to support them because Antifa and the radical leftists were mad. This is after George Floyd. They had the blue lines, or, Police Lives Matter. And they wanted it off. They said it represented, supremacy. So we went up there, and the Proud Boys, my buddies, were next to me. I'm with my cop buddy, and I took a picture with the head of the Proud Boys. I'm 60 years. I'm 64 now, and he flashed the sign. I'm laughing. You could see me laughing in that picture, right, on the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm like, oh, I see him. I'm like, oh, it's stupid. It's an okay sign. And I'm 60 and I was laughing, but he pushed that in the front cover of the SPLC side, flashing white supremacy sign. It's like, give me a break, and all this crazy stuff they spun, lied. I was devastated. I worked for one of the biggest international French consulting firms in the world out of Paris. DEI, massive department, sustainability crap I was supposed to sell. I'm like, oh my God, I was, and I was in the middle of cancer treatment. I was on intense radiation and hormones to lower my testosterone so I, fight the cancer. So I wasn't even my normal self. I mean, I was so messed up from the hormones, but I was, it levels out your testosterone. So I was devastated. I'm like, oh my God.
Well, they framed you as a dangerous figure. You're this right-wing, radical extremist, white supremacist. How did this affect your family, your reputation, your work, your community?
So then there's what's called patches. I don't know if you have patches local, like all over. They have different patches. Patches Darien. The guy, Dave Giuliani, reposted it and said, local Darien political. I became a political leader, by the way, which I was just a committeeman for like 5 blocks in my suburb, but they embellished that. And then it affects my family and stuff locally, because the SPLC, unless you're only really heavily into politics, right? So it went locally and I'm being banned, battered by everybody. So then they labeled me. So then when I would go to events and protesters would show up, racist, white supremacist, Terry Newsome, I shut down the library had, they had trans bingo and singing Katy Perry songs with another transvestite Italian with a beard and dress skirts, and I stopped it. The protest. And somebody from out of state sent a bullet. Somebody sent a Confederate flag. They blamed it on me. I had nothing to do with that stuff. You know what I mean? But they blamed it on me locally and stuff. I have nothing against gay people at all. I never did. Never before, never during or after. And I always said that. I just want my children to be children. Gay kids are kids just like our children. They're not, sexual deviants that, they're trying to tell us if they don't see a BJ picture or they have, this crazy kinky type of sex that it's visible in school, they won't feel included or they might hang themselves or commit.
Well, there's a lot of gay people I know that don't want to be associated with the trans part. Like, they're like, why are we being lumped in with trans? It's because they don't agree with it either.
Yeah. So matter of fact, they put my group, Jeff Tischhauser, Mr. Antifa, which is now labeled a domestic terrorist, ironically, and they never say anything about Antifa and BLM. They label my group and specifically this Illinois State chapter as a hate group with Moms for America, Moms for Liberty. I ran events with Gays Against Groomers, Log Cabin Republicans, gay people on the stage. I had 3 venues shut down because they started attacking them, threatening not just the venue, the kids that would answer the phone, the owners' houses, the bands. If a band was going to perform on the same stage that we do our events during the week, they would go and reach out and say, you have white supremacy ties, Nazi ties, to harass them physically as well as in their business. And then they would repost or share the Southern Poverty Law Center, which fits the exact purpose of why you investigate them, right? They weaponized that on behalf of the Democrats to silence anybody. And if anyone's familiar with the Antifa and their handbook, they go after people, even though I was a nobody. They want to take us out. They don't want us to have any voice. Guys like me are big people that are really irrelevant. And at the local level, nobody was pushing back like me. And so I became quickly on their radar because of that woman associated with Antifa. Jeff Tischauer's an Antifa associate. That's how I popped on the Southern Poverty Law Centers.
And there were real-world consequences that you had to face. I mean, besides the harassment, you also lost your job, correct?
Yeah. So, and I'll explain because I know this is important. So November 31st, the SPLC story comes out, 2022. December 1st, the SPLC, a different person, reposts as a press release that story and embellished my relevance in the Republican Party, and it came out as a press release. So I remember at the time, before I knew anything about this SPLC stuff, I'm like, why are they doing that? Well, you know why they did it. It's in D.C. They wanted to go in the swamp and make sure everybody saw that story attaching me as a Republican leader, you know what I mean? To make it look worse than what it really was. I mean, they lied about everything with respect to that. Then the following day, which I didn't know until I was getting ready for this story in the last few weeks, because it is important now with SPLC and the weaponization of the government. On December 3rd, I suddenly popped up on the sedition hunters. Do you know what the sedition hunters is?
Yes.
Yes. I became a person of interest, and they took the SPLC story and incorporated that in there on December 3rd. They took Chicago Antifa, where they were threatened to drop pops. I was the oldest. They called me Pops because I was old. I was old dad. It's time to drop pops. Oh, they even said Terry Newsome told us, Antifa, that he's willing to take a bullet to fight communism. I don't talk to those guys unless I confront them at an event. They never asked me that. That was a dog whistle for them, to threaten me, right? And then those are the same guys that Jeff Tischauer interacts with regularly. Even that Twitter thing I showed you where he said to reach out to Antifa. Those are his connections, his Antifa boys, right? So Sedition Hunters is ran by Antifa. They put my company, my LinkedIn profile on there. Then they pulled snapshots from other people's cameras. And then Jeff Tischauer was posting stuff on X and tagging his friends in Antifa. And then they would tag my CEO from Paris, my CEO from North America, the head of our DEI, saying, Terry Newsome, white supremacist, racist, Capgemini, why do you claim to be DEI supporter when you have a homophobe? It kept tagging them and tagging them. I contacted Twitter, Ella Irwin, if you remember that name, when Elon first bought X. I was begging her to please stop this, stop harassing I'm going to lose my job. Remember, I was begging her. I was on the hormones, and I was like emotionally saying, please, I just had back-to-back cancers. I don't want to lose my job. Could you stop this? And she said it's part of the international whatever liberal bullshit. She refused to take down Antifa, harassing my executives. I got all the emails. So what's unique is my story. So many people were victims of the weaponization of the Biden administration, SPLC. My story, I have the receipts from the Democrats, SPLC, Antifa, the Biden administration, Twitter, all together working, not that it's a direct integrated conspiracy, it was loosely coupled, but they're all, I don't say it was loosely coupled between SPLC and the government. That was tightly coupled, right? And then loosely coupled with Antifa on Twitter. And we have the receipts for that. So, on December 3rd.
Well, we were told that Antifa is just an idea. This obviously shows the amount of organization and coordination, not just within Antifa, but between organizations like Antifa and the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah, exactly. So
Democrat officials.
Yeah. So, my background from Chicago with the guys, I would, debate people heavily with respect to what you just said, right? Oh, Antifa is a decentralized organization. They don't have an org chart. They don't have listed leaders and stuff. I'm like, well, the same with the mob, right? The mob, who puts the mob's org chart together? FBI, right? They're decentralized to try to, they have different crews throughout, they try to keep it decentralized purposefully.
Absolutely.
Drugs. I go, so thank you, Democrats, you're describing organized crime. That, people don't push back on our side enough. Just call them out and say, thanks, you are describing organized crime. So thanks.
Well, most people on the right are cowards. And this is what a lot of people miss. You look at the Southern Poverty Law Center, you see Hate Watch or Extremist Report, and people tend to think that that's official. They don't realize it's an ideological organization that's pushing for totalitarianism here in the United States. And for the people that are named by the Southern Poverty Law Center, essentially it becomes a permission slip for harassment. We've seen numerous lawsuits with individuals, Najid Nawaz, and a few others who have sued and successfully won. Terry, have you decided to try and sue the Southern Poverty Law Center, especially with the new information that they had direct ties to the United States government, that they were almost working at the behest of the United States?
Yes. So, I mean, just with all the new developments in the last month, yes, that's part I'm putting together this summary, who I'll be meeting with soon and all this other stuff that I have going on behind the scenes. I was with the Center for Self-Governance in June of 2023, met with, Mike Lee for half an hour, all these other Republicans, but the Democrats were in charge then, all specifically about the SPLC and their ties to Antifa. So, I want to show the receipts, and I got to talk quickly because I keep, the receipts that we have to prove the connectivity, right? So I on December 19th, my family, my wife hates politics. My kids, my twins were 15. They were VIP guests of Charlie Kirk's, all expenses paid. They got to bring 2 friends to Manton Fest. So we go. Long story short, I couldn't get boarding passes for myself. I took my family to get them through the TSA, my platinum. I had TSA PreCheck Forever, international flyer. And unknown to me, I was labeled domestic terrorist, Quad Est. My family was Quad Est. I took them to the TSA. Before I knew all this, I said, here, get my family through. I can't get my pass. I go back over there. I didn't know the woman at ticketing was on the phone with DC. She didn't tell me. I'm like, what's going on?
So you were on a watch list.
Yeah, I go, what's going on? I'm going to miss my plane, and it's like, then I see the TSA, 4 agents take my whole family out of line. I run over there. I go, what are you guys doing? They go, he goes, your name must be on a list with an accident or something. I'm like, what? I go over there. I go, what's going on? I go, are you on the home phone with help desk still? She said, yes. I go, I got to go. I'm going to miss my family and my flight. She goes, here, this will get you through past the TSA, and then you'll get your boarding pass at the gate. Unknown to me at that time, I was not allowed to fly no matter where, until they call and got permission from DC. I didn't know this.
I mean, that's ridiculous, but it shows you something that I've harped on this podcast, the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism, how it was nothing more than to weaponize it against ordinary Americans like yourself. It talks about anti-government sentiment, anti-authority sentiment. Anyone who speaks out and criticizes could be labeled a domestic terrorist and land on one of these lists. And so you were impacted by that.
Yeah.
This is why your story matters. This is why your story is so important, because there's an infrastructure to this. You have a parent that speaks out locally. You have activists come out and attack him. The SPLC labels you. Media outlets then cite the Southern Poverty Law Center. You got DC getting involved. How does this chill other parents from speaking up and speaking out?
Oh, they're scared. They were scared to death before. Why it's so important? I fought more. I mean, that's a whole different story. I fought more. I confronted Antifa, BLM. You see my stuff up there? I was so angry. And it didn't scare me into hiding. It pissed me off. It was just, people got fight. Mine's fight. I was like fighting. And so, to go back to the receipts, right? So that's when I found out, at the airport when we missed our flights, and one American airline gate agent came up to me and my family. He goes, man, you're on a list with real bad people. I go, really? He goes, yeah. That's how I found out I was on this list, right? And so the receipts, I was in Epoch Time. A bunch of stories were written up about that, right? So I got a call. I got a text message from Matt Gaetz' attorney around first part of January, and talked to him. Eventually, they wrote a demand letter to Garland, Ray, and Mayorkas on my behalf, wanting to know why they did this to me, because Terry peacefully attended January 6th, or because he was a vocal school board parent. All of them acknowledged they got receipt of that, and they never answered the man to say why I was done to that. And then Congressman Troy Neal saw one of the stories. He gave the reporter his phone number, said, tell him to call me. So I was like, I call him. He's a great guy, right? He goes, yeah, we know what's going on. He goes, I'm on the transportation committee. This was back in 2023. He goes, I'm going to reach out to the TSA for you and try to get some answers. So he gets his response back from somebody senior at the TSA. And in the letter, and you probably have that. Probably sent that to you. It said that, so I didn't know on December 19th, I was labeled this, but I didn't know when or where, right? It started. In the letter, this guy admits to Troy Niels, well, as of December 15th, right? 2 weeks after SPLC, we reviewed Terry Newsom's TSA pre-check privilege. He no longer fits the privilege of TSA pre-check. So look at the timing and stuff, right? This is a year and a half or so after J6, after my big school board meeting. What was the only coincidence was the SPLC story, right? That was the only thing the evidence showed there, right? And then Matt Gaetz, then my intense scrutiny got worse. They would send 5 TSA agents, undercover marshals, before I board the airplane. And everyone looked at me and they searched me again. I get on the plane, everyone's looking. I say, listen, I go, I'm one of those school board dads. So I had to do it every time I flew. And then fast forward, let's say, March that year, FBI showed up on my porch, and you might have saw the pictures. I'm talking to them. They first said they're here because Antifa was going after my freedom of speech. Then you see my arms like this. They go, oh, by the way, this is under the Biden administration. We know you were at January 6th. I said, hold on a minute. That was a few years ago. You guys know where everybody was. I didn't go in. I didn't do anything. I go, so why are you asking me that? He goes, oh, I had to ask you. So, I don't know if that was more they pretended to try to, embrace me because of the Antifa thing. And I didn't do anything. I didn't get arrested. I left before people went in. I left because I was exhausted from I was on January 5th at University of Chicago on IV for the melanoma cancer at the time. It's outside from the prostate cancer. I was exhausted. I told my friend, I got to go. I was laying on the grass before people went in. I wasn't even there. But Jeff Tischhauser says when Terry Newsome, we asked him about why is he trying to overthrow the government, we, meaning him and the SPLC, asked him, no response. So he sent that X to everybody in behalf of him and the SPLC, which I'd like to use in the future. And that was used to say I was a domestic terrorist and I tried to overthrow the government. And then, last February, 2 Februaries ago, I was curious. I said FBI FOIAs for 2020 to 2025. They finally got back to me in May last year and said that they had 346 pages of FOIAs of FBI from me from 2022 and 2023. What does that line up with? SPLC, right?
Well, it's crazy because, again, I think that this is evidence that shows how much influence they had over the government and our law enforcement communities, our intelligence communities, and our schools. And it shows the integration of this ideological group that's supposed to be a nonprofit organization that's on a seek and destroy mission for anyone that stands up for what they believe in and takes them on. Have you been in touch recently with members of Congress, given what's going on now?
Yes, I'll be meeting with some next week. Next week, I'll be meeting with some. And I know my story was passed on to Jim Jordan's and through a chief of staff of somebody. So we'll see how that goes there. Another big piece of this story that shows the coordination effort, right? I hosted Tom Homan in Chicago for a big event, Border 911 with Sarah Carter. She's the DA czar and, a bunch of folks back, so Tom Homan, I had him come to Chicago, in the city of Chicago, in where I grew up, Democrat blue, sold out police officer. It was awesome. Right. And so then a year later, after Trump won the election in December that year, he came back to Chicago and I had private meetings with him in his hotel by the airport with top Chicago cops that are still there. Senior Alderman Raymond Lopez, Democrat. He's on the Fox News all the time. Other Hispanic leaders and stuff that wanted Tom to come to Chicago, wanted his help. The Gateway Pundit wrote a really nice story about it, right? And he's got me and Tom and Lopez on the front cover of it, right? Guess what Jeff Tischhauser does? He writes another story about a month later or so, and then says Trump administration meets with Proud Boy associate talking about immigration policy. And then that went and spread everywhere, right? That spread everywhere, trying to denounce Tom Homan and me and hurt him and the Trump administration ties to the white supremacist, Proud Boys, right? And then they're all tied together, right? Wikipedia is left-wing scumbags. What does Wikipedia do? They take that story and put it in Tom's Wikipedia. Terry Newsome, Proud Boy associate, discusses immigration policies with Tom Homan. I mean, it's just crazy. It's utterly crazy. And so that story was spread around everywhere, and other stories were picked up. And then I don't know if that initiated, how they hired people from the Proud Boys to work for for Homeland. I don't know if you saw those crazy stories. I mean, they lie and spin, and this is to exactly what you investigate. They're working together. They're an extension of the Democratic Party. It's a weaponized tool. The media, everyone, people puts out polls. What's the most dangerous, thing in America now? China, Russia. It's the mainstream media. I think, me personally, because they have a level of credibility in the eyes of many people, and I think they're more dangerous than China or North Korea because everybody, the citizens, know it's corrupt, ran by the government military. Here, they're supposed to be neutral. People are not smart enough to know, they're no different than China's media.
Well, in my opinion, the biggest threat to me is the bureaucracy first, because we see that there's no longer people that work for the bureaucracy. I mean, there are some. I don't want to overgeneralize, but too many have put their ideology before everything else. And their ideology is what drives them and drives the agency mission, as opposed to what the agency mission should really be about. The Democratic Party next, because obviously they're going down this socialism and communist road. And that is a threat to the system, to the American way of life. And then I think a big problem is the civic ignorance of the American people, who don't understand how America was founded, how it was built, our inherent rights, what's the purpose of them. But one of the things that does annoy me is Congress. And I'm talking about Republican members of Congress, because they go in front of the cameras, they feign outrage, they'll call people like you to come and testify. Whistleblowers will come and testify, and then they do nothing about it. Like, Congress is the one with oversight. They're the ones that could literally fix this problem overnight. Just pass a law. You can't have these public-private partnerships anymore. You can't have the FBI coordinating with these outside ideological organizations that, let's face it, their books are very shaky, and it's going to be interesting to see what develops during the trial, what comes out about their books and their finances and the shell companies that exist and all the other people involved. But the Congress could fix this, and they haven't. What is going to be your message to them when you sit down with them?
So I want to pick up where we left off on June of 2023. And if you heard Blanche when he first talked about the SPLC, he said, if you remember him, the very first statement, he goes, this started in 2023. If it did start in 23, but it was under the Biden administration. And I was told we had 2 days meetings back to back that was set up by the Center for Self-Governance. I was representing parents as a victim. There was other individuals there, but they were going specifically then to go after their nonprofit. I was excited, and then I just never heard anything, right? And we know why now. And now they're aggressively going after them. They're aggressively going after them, and they got to take their nonprofit. And I stand a little bit corrected when I said to me, I agree with everything you said, right? Wholeheartedly. I agree that I lumped the media in as being part of that Democratic, I mean, they're really,
they're an extension of the Democratic Party now.
And the danger comes from the bureaucracy, like you said, but the messaging becomes more dangerous enabled by the media. You know what I'm saying? I agree with what you said, but the visibility and the messaging to support the corruption of the bureaucracy is pushed out through the media, which makes it more dangerous. It amplifies their danger because people believe the lies that these bureaucrats are pushing out, and they protect them so that we don't have the truth for people to make the right decision. And the American people, they got too comfortable. Like when my grandparents came from it, everybody worked hard and stuff, but they don't care. Each generation got softer and softer. That's why we can't get dads or people to help fight on the front lines like this. They don't want to lose their job. I didn't want to lose my job. After the FBI came here, my wife, I hit all this stuff that's been happening. That was just one. My wife started screaming at me when they left. Like screeching. She's not like that. You got to stop this. You got to stop this. And then she broke down. She started crying. She goes, you got your cancer. I'm not supposed to be stressed. I can't live without it. But, in your job. And I'm like, I don't want to lose my job, Carrie. I said, but I don't want to go to my deathbed without trying to fight for our kids. And the reason we're in the situation we're in right now is that nobody fought back. Nobody fought back. Like you got your shows.
Well, after everything you went through, what advice would you give to ordinary Americans, to parents who see something wrong in their child's school or within American society, but they're so afraid of being labeled, smeared, or targeted? Do you think, are you now seeing that people are starting to get the courage, or do you think we're still in the same trap?
We're in the same trap, and it's worse here in the state of Illinois after Pritzker put his rules of no book banning and all this crazy stuff, and they're more aggressive here in the state of Illinois. What I tell people, though, is you got to understand we're in a war. Most people don't realize we're in a war, and we're losing the war badly. They don't even know we're in a war, let alone that we're losing. I presented to the Italian American Labor Council, labor union leaders, right? All the different trades of top, I presented to these, they're most older guys, right? Because they're leaders, about the porn. This was a few years ago, 3 years ago, and I brought the nasty BJ pictures, right? And they're all Democrats. I mean, I've worked for I was in 2 unions. My dad, that's all we knew, right? And I showed them I handed out these pictures, and they're like, what the F? These guys, this is my grandkids' schools? I'm like, yeah, 2 guys got up from the table and called their sons. Hey, this guy, he's showing me this shit. Is it in our kid? They're like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God, so the one guy, he was from the electricians union, and he goes, I'm in a tough spot. The tough spot is the corruption of the Democrats, right? In Illinois, I'm in a tough spot, with the Democrats. And so my closing statement to those guys is I said, listen, guys, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor, if you're a sales rep like me, or if you're in a union like you, right? We're all working for our families and our children, grandchildren, future. If we don't have an effing country, who cares about your union? If we don't have a country,
the union won't exist.
It's like, who cares? I go, you guys got to help out. And I was so honored. Like, that was on a Thursday. On a Friday night, this was a few years ago, Skippy, he was, I forgot that he started another union a long time ago. He goes, hey, I got your number from Joe Martucci. If you don't mind calling, this is 9:00 at night. He goes, listen, he goes, I got to tell you, I couldn't sleep last night. Everything you sold me, I helped start so-and-so international union. I just met with Pritzker. This is right for his last election, about, voting and stuff. I can't effing sleep, man. I'm disgusted. I can't help that guy. He goes, how can I help you? And and so, he would show up to some of my events. And that was exactly why I'm doing your show. We have to get people to be awakened and understand the dangers that are out there of doing nothing. There's dangers of doing nothing. So, I don't want to lose my job, but I don't want to lose my country for my kids. I'm going to do every little bit I can, as long as I can, being on the front lines, confronting them, exposing stuff, and trying to awaken people. I think that's one of the biggest things your show can do and ours. Unfortunately, a lot of people that watch our shows are people like us. so.
Well, I always remind my audience that if the America that we know collapses, what comes next is not going to be better. I could assure everyone of that. And that's why it is important to get active, to get engaged, to speak out when you see things wrong. And I do believe that the majority is on our sides. It's just far too many people have their heads buried in the sand and just are clueless. Terry, I really appreciate you coming on the program. I'm going to have links up at the website for people to follow you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Nick.
Thank you for listening to the PAS Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at PAS Report.